So this week we have the second matchup of the season for the Packers and Lions. Last time, the Lions won 24-14. I do think right now, about a month out from the past game, that this is a very different Packers team and a somewhat different Lions team because of all the injuries they faced, especially this past week. And when you look at the NFC North, it's been one of the best divisions in football. The Lions at the top, 11-1, then the Vikings, and then the Packers sitting at third at 9-3. And I think there's this idea in the air that the Lions are a much better team than the Packers, but they're only separated by 2 losses. The Packers have missed Jordan Love for a few games. He dealt with a lot of different injuries earlier in the season. And I think right now, with how the Packers are playing at this time, that they are pretty much the same caliber of team as the Detroit Lions are right now at this time. It's not to say the Lions aren't a very good team or one of the best in the league. I just happen to believe that the way the Packers have played, with Jordan Love healthy, with the way the Packers have run the ball efficiently, the way they've stopped the run, the way the pass rush has gotten better, McManus has played really well kicking the football. I really do think this is a very good Packers team, and you always hope that by the end of the season that your team can really be playing at the top of their game, and I think that's what we're seeing right now from the Packers. It will be a very good test against the Lions because they do have one of the best teams in the NFL. And so when we look back to that last game where the Packers lost 24-14, it was a very interesting game. Jordan Love was hobbling around a lot. He wasn't really fully healthy. And in that game, the Packers outgained the Lions 411 yards to 261. The Packers' biggest problem was their inability to convert in the red zone. They went 1 for 4 in the red zone. And this had been a problem for the Packers for a majority of the season. Before the past 2 weeks, the Packers were 27th in the NFL in red zone conversion, converting touchdowns in the red zone. And just in the past 2 weeks, the Packers have jumped up 12 spots to 15th in the NFL because of how effective and efficient they have been in the red zone in their past 2 games against the Dolphins this past week, and then the prior week against the San Francisco 49ers as well. So the Packers' red zone offense has gotten a lot better in the past few weeks, which I think has been the one missing key for this Packers offense. They were consistently, up, ranking very high in the NFL when it comes to yards per play, things like that. And overall this season, they're second in yards per play. Their issue had been the red zone. And the fact that they're fixing that right now is what's allowed them to be playing at some of their highest level. And they're still the 8th best scoring offense in the league, even with lots of those red zone problems a majority of the season. And when we look back to that game against the Lions about a month ago, Jordan Love throws that pick 6 right before the end of the first half. It was 10-3. After the pick 6, it's 17-3. And that's a completely different game. And so Jordan Love, the past couple weeks, has thrown 0 interceptions. And, to play against a very good team like the Lions, you can't be making mistakes, especially mistakes that end up in, 7 points for the other team in those careless interceptions that, could lead to a pick 6. And so I do think that game, it was an odd one. The Packers played really sloppy football. They had 6 or so drops. They had 10 penalties. They couldn't convert in the red zone. They had no problem moving the ball, as I said, outgaining the Lions by basically close to 150 yards. And so looking at this game this Thursday is going to be a good game. In Detroit, the Packers don't have that home field advantage. I've said it before. I do think this Packers team, playing a little bit as the underdog, I think can play in their favor. They seem to have guys who sort of like playing with that chip on their shoulder, and I think that they, like going into situations where maybe the sports media landscape in general would say, oh, the Lions are a better team. I think the Packers can sort of get some fuel from that and go into Detroit and win this game on Thursday. And let me read the most important thing here about the Lions and their injuries, that they're dealing with a ton on defense specifically. Let me read this short quote from Jeremy Reisman at prideofdetroit.com, a Lions blog. He basically shares the injury information. He says the Detroit Lions have scrambled to add healthy players on the defensive side of the ball this week. Last week against the Chicago Bears, the Lions lost 4 players to injury: defensive tackles Levi Onwuzurike and DJ Reader, defensive end Josh Paschal, and linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez. All 4 players missed the first 2 practices of the week, and Reader is the only player who has an outside chance of playing. Add those 4 injuries to a unit that is already missing Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport, Derek Barnes, Alex Anzalone, and Jalen Reeves, Mabin. And it's no wonder that the Lions went shopping for players in the past few days. They apparently signed 4 players: Miles Adams from the Seahawks practice squad, Quan Alexander, linebacker, Jonah Williams, and Jamal Adams. So the Lions are dealing with a ton of injuries right now, and I do think that is going to affect what we see coming up on Thursday. But this is still a Lions defense that has been one of the best in the NFL, second best scoring defense, allowing only 16.9 points per game. And so I do think we're going to see a much different defense with a lot of these players missing. But when you have one of the best defenses in football, they still have a lot of top-tier talent, top-tier players outside of those guys who are injured. But I would say they're somewhat weak now because of these different injuries. If we look at their statistical, sort of where they rank this season, 10th in yards allowed per game, 11th in yards per play, 25th in pass yards allowed per game, 11th in pass yards allowed per play. They have a pretty solid pass rush still, 12th in pressure percentage, 17th in sacks. When it comes to rushing, I'd say they're a middle-of-the-road type rushing defense when it comes to yards, rush yards per play, 15th in the NFL, but they are overall 5th in rush yards allowed per game. And so this is a very, very good Lions defense, but I think that when you look at, the Packers offense and the Lions defense, the Packers are a much healthier unit right now. And because of that, because they're, a lot healthier at this time, I do think it's going to, play into, the Packers' favor overall in this one. And one thing we've seen, the Packers have a lot of different ways they can beat you. Josh Jacobs has been one of the most productive running backs this season, 5th most rush yards in the NFL. The Packers overall have the 5th most rush yards in the NFL per game, but Josh Jacobs has the 3rd most rushing yards overall at 987 yards. And so when the Packers are able to run the ball consistently, they don't even need Jordan Love to do that much, even though he still does. And I think that when you have a team that you can rely on the run, and then it sets up the play action, it sets up, Jordan Love. When you're down and you need something big to happen, Jordan Love can make it happen. We saw it against the Vikings earlier in the season when Jordan Love was coming back from the injury, playing the Vikings. He still threw, 3 picks in that game, but the Packers almost won that game, almost came back down by a few scores. So that's the thing, that you have a player in Jordan Love who can take a game over if he needs to, but it's really promising to see what the Packers have been able to do on the ground with Josh Jacobs. The offensive line has been one of the best in the NFL for the Packers, 9th lowest pressure percentage allowed per NFL Pro, 2nd fewest sacks allowed with 15. And Jordan Love is very good at just avoiding pressure, avoiding sacks, which is why he's been sacked at the 2nd lowest rate in the entire NFL. And the one thing with Love that we've talked about all season is those interceptions. The past couple weeks, he's cleaned it up a little bit, hasn't thrown a pick in the past 2 games. And it's starting to look a little bit like last season down the stretch where Jordan Love started playing some of his best football he had played all season long. He went through that stretch of 7 or 8 games where he had about 18 touchdowns to 1 interception. And it really does feel to me like right now, just like last year, around this time, end of November, early December, the Packers really started playing their best football. The past couple weeks, it's looked like that's what the Packers are starting to do. And this will be a very good test to see if that's really what's going on right now against the Lions, who are one of the best teams in all of the NFL. So should be a good matchup in that way. And then if we look to the Lions and their offense, they're still the best offense in football. 31.9 points per game, 2nd most yards per game, 4th in yards per play. The last time the Packers played them, the Packers were without Jaire Alexander and Evan Williams. Jaire may be back. He's practiced this week. Evan Williams, of course, has been back the past few weeks. The Lions didn't have Jameson Williams last time, if I remember that correctly. I'm pretty sure he wasn't playing for the Lions. He'll be here this week. And the Lions, they can pretty much beat you in any way. 5th most pass yards per game. Jared Goff, 22 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. 2nd in passer rating. And then the rushing attack, 4th in yards per game. 8th in rush yards per play. And they have that dynamic duo of Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. I'd say that it's probably the best rushing attack duo in the NFL, with Gibbs averaging 6 yards a carry, Montgomery averaging 4.3 yards per carry. But the last time when the Packers played the Lions, I do think the defense had a very good day. You take away the Jordan Love pick 6, which isn't really the defense's fault. They held the Lions to only 17 points, which I think is very good considering the Lions, as I said, have been averaging about 31.9 points per game. And so the Lions last game against the Packers, Goff only threw it for 145 yards, 18 of 22. Was very efficient, but not crazy numbers. and the Lions only ran the ball for 3.9 yards a carry. And so if the Packers put out the same defensive performance as last time, I think the Packers can win this game, because I do think that the Packers offense should be playing much better in this one. And sort of last time, I thought the Packers would have to put up a ton of points, and they needed more because, the defense played a good game, but Jordan Love pick 6 sort of threw things off. But I do think the defense played really well the last time around, and I think they can do it once again. And so when we look at the Packers defense so far this year, they've been better than last year. They're same currently when it comes to ranks of points allowed, 10th in points allowed per game at 20, 12th in yards per game, 15th in yards per play. Passing defense, 17th in pass yards per game allowed, 16th in pass yards per play, so pretty average there. But the one area the Packers have really taken up to a whole nother level here this season is their rushing defense, which has been something new here in Green Bay, because for years and years, the Packers' run defense had been one of the worst in the league, consistently struggled, consistently ranked, in the mid-20s or so. And this year, the Packers are 8th in rush yards allowed per game and 7th in rush yards allowed per play. So a top 10 rushing defense, which is something we haven't seen in Green Bay for a very long time. And so I think Jeff Hafley is a big part of that. The Packers' defensive line has been playing really well recently. And even though right now the Packers are still 25th in pressure percentage, when it comes to getting pressure on the quarterback, they've been getting a little more pressure the past few weeks. 5 sacks this past week. Rashawn Gary's playing a lot better. Lucas Van Ness has started to play a lot better football. And it was something like 2 or 3 weeks ago I made a video about these former first-round picks for the Packers, aren't not looking too good. And Lucas Van Ness was one of them. Since that video, since that game, the past 2 games since that video, he's played really good football. So it's nice to see him starting to really produce a little bit more. That's what we wanted to see. We've seen Quay Walker play really good football as well. And so when we have Quay playing some of his best football, Lucas Van Ness starting to come alive a little bit, lots of the other defensive players playing well, I think the Packers really are shaping into form. And when you have a defensive coordinator who's new here, you would expect it to take a little bit of time for everything to be clicking. And it's looking like some of these guys are really able to take what Jeff Hafley is teaching them and what he wants the defense to be. And it looks like over time they've added more and more and have gotten more effective overall. And one of the other areas the Packers are much better this year, their third down defense, 11th in the NFL. Jeff Hafley, when you watch third downs, he likes to show a lot of different pressure. He'll do some disguises, bring like 6-7 guys up on the line, then only rush 4. He does a lot of different things on third down. Is pretty aggressive, and I think that's one area the Packers have improved. And so far this season, the biggest thing has been the Packers' ability to take the ball away, with currently them having the 4th most takeaways per game. And Xavier McKinney has been, dominant when it comes to intercepting the ball. I think he's at 7 now, tied for the league lead. So it's going to be another good test for the Packers defense. We'll see if Jair is back this week. Hopefully he is, because the Packers have been missing him. And the Packers played some pretty good football against the Dolphins. They were up a few scores. It felt like they were sort of playing a little bit softer defensively later in the game, allowing a lot of stuff in the intermediate area where they're sort of allowing Tua to complete some of those passes, not really trying to give up things deep. But I do think when you're up 3 scores, you're trying to, make them go play after play after play, maybe make the clock, tick down a lot faster, as they, have to slowly move the ball down the field. But I do think this is going to be a really good test once again for the Packers defense. So it's going to be a good one. I'll get my score prediction. I really do think the Packers are just as good, if not better, than the Lions now with how they're playing, with how healthy Jordan Love is. And so I really do think the Packers are going to go into Detroit and beat the Lions. I think that, as I said earlier, they're going to come in a little bit seen as the underdog. I think that's going to bode well for the Packers and their aggressiveness and sort of how they come into this game. And just like last year, the Packers beat the Lions in Detroit. It was on Thanksgiving last time. I think they're going to do it once again about a week later, about a year and a week later, in one of these first games in December. So I'm going to say the Packers win this game 27, Lions 21. I think the Packers are going to pull this one off, especially with a beat-up Lions defense. But let me know your score predictions in the comment section down below. And if you want to see my post-game reaction, whether the Packers win or lose, feel free to subscribe and turn on the notifications. That way, the second I make the video and other Packers news videos, you'll get notified on your phone right away. But thank you for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at LukeBeller3 for some in-game thoughts. But that's it for this one, and I'll see you guys next time.